Good morning. Happy Thursday, November 5th. It is an amusing day because the election is still going on. Nobody has really been able to soundly declare themselves a winner. And the country is racked with all sorts of emotion and drama as people are doubling down, I guess, in their support for their candidate. Now, just to show the depravity of my apathy when it comes to the specifics of this election, I wrote in basic campfire. I didn't vote for Trump, didn't vote for Biden, because it's going to be a mess either way. It doesn't matter. The state that I live in, Washington, I think the last time I checked, there are 1 million more votes for Biden than for Trump. And even Joe Jorgensen, the libertarian candidate, has gotten, just a paltry amount. It's a state that's already going to go a particular direction, and one vote's not going to change that. And again, as I've been talking about in the previous days, it's not going to change how I'm supposed to live on a day-to-day basis. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a guide for us when we are under the rule of evil people. And if that's the path that God has set for us because that's what we deserve as a country, then that's what we're going to get. Because what I've noticed recently, or at least I've put it to conscious thought, is that people just don't pay attention to detail anymore. People aren't paying attention to specifics. In my workplace environment, we have so many details that need to be kept track of that conversations quickly degrade into incoherence because not everybody is able to keep a handle on all of the relevant details as is necessary to have a constructive conversation. People will forget things that had been discussed. People will conflate two different things that are similar but not the same. And what we're seeing right now with the election is a similar manifestation of that same problem. So on the one side, we see, so from the right now, the contention is that too many votes are being counted because they're not legitimate. And on the left, the contention is that the votes aren't being counted because they are legitimate, and so people are being disenfranchised. And both are coherent arguments to make. And regardless of what you think may be going on behind the scenes, you have to admire the thought that went into setting up this framework, because it's a continuation of the problem that we've had with the quote-unquote conservative right for a long time now, where there is some ideological value that is held up really high, that is claimed, at least, to be really important, and then that same value is then put on its head. It's inverted and perverted in order to destroy the whole system. There's a guy named Saul Alinsky who had rules for radicals. And let me see if I can find one. So I'm going to go over these rules real quick. And I want you to think about how these rules relate to what you would do or what you could do in the event you wanted to upend an election. Rule number 1, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. So, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. 2, never go outside the expertise of your people. 3, whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. 4, make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. And that's the one that I want to key in on, but I'll still read the rest of them. 5, ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It is almost impossible to counterattack a ridicule. It also infuriates the opposition, who then react to your advantage. 6, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. 7, a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. 8, keep the pressure on. 9, the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. And that one's also important too, but we're not going to talk about that one today. 10, the major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a consistent or a constant pressure upon the opposition. 11, if you push a negative hard enough and deep enough, it will break through into its counterside. This is based on the principle that every positive has its negative. 12, the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. 13, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. So 13, I think we can say, is definitely been a... But anyway, go back to number 4. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. So this is where the criticism of the people on the right, I saw on one Reddit thread where they were putting 2 different Trump-supporting groups in 2 different states in 2 different circumstances side by side as if it was an apples-to-apples comparison. One group was saying, count the votes, and the other group was saying, stop counting the votes. And the joke is supposed to be that nobody can discern the subtlety between one state deciding to influence the election by refusing to count votes for a particular candidate, and a different state using a different tactic to inflate the vote count for one candidate instead of just not counting votes. At no point are people supposed to connect the dots that might be a possibility. What's supposed to be done is showing, hey, look, these Trump supporters are inconsistent. They're hypocritical. They don't know what they're doing. They're not paying attention to what's going on. And so what ends up happening is that that goes to the rule about never go outside the expertise of your people. The rule number 2. So if the expertise of your people is to just point and laugh and to mock and deride, then it doesn't matter if it's wrong. If that's all that they can comprehend and understand, if that's all that they can do, if that's all that they can accomplish, then that's going to be a successful tactic. And so it doesn't even matter what's real or not. At that point in time, these details are where people are getting caught up. So the way to subvert rule number 4, where it says make the enemy live up to its own book of rules, is knowing when you have to throw the rules out, when you have to break or bend them, and being able to do so consistently and with good reason. If we're in a circumstance where we have evidence that ballots are being faked or fraudulently inserted into the system, then you would have every right to say, well, we should not count the votes that are not legitimate. That shouldn't be a difficult thing to argue for. Likewise, if there is a place where votes are not being counted or ballots are being destroyed or burned or all that kind of stuff, again, it shouldn't be difficult to say, these rules need to be counted, and here's the reason why. Unless the audience can't handle that level of subtlety. That's the thing. That's the thing about detail. The vast majority of people not really being able to handle details very well. Not being able to compare things that are really close but not identical. Being able to separate them in their own mind and keep track of it. In the Bible, it says, let me find it real quick. Off the top of my head, it says, my people suffer and for a lack of knowledge. But there's I want to get the whole thing. So it's Hosea chapter 4. I'm going to pull this up. There we go. Listen to the word of the Lord, you sons of Israel, because the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land. For there is no faithfulness, nor loyalty, nor knowledge of God in the land. There is oath-taking, denial, murder, stealing, and adultery. They employ violence so that bloodshed follows bloodshed. Therefore the land mourns, and everyone who lives in it languishes, along with the animals of the field and the birds of the sky, and even the fish of the sea disappear. Interesting parallel, huh? Yet let no one find fault, and let no one rebuke, for your people are like those who contend with a priest. So you will stumble by day, and the prophet will also stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Since you have rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being my priest, Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will forget your children. The more they multiplied, the more they sinned against me. I will change their glory into shame. They will feed on the sin of my people and long for their wrongdoing. And it will be like people, like priests. So I will punish them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. They will eat but not have enough. They will play the prostitute but not increase, because they gave up devoting themselves to the Lord. Infidelity, wine, and new wine take away the understanding. My people consult their wooden idol, and their diviner's wand informs them. For a spirit of infidelity has led them astray, and they have been unfaithful, departing from their God. They offer sacrifices on the tops of the mountains, and burn incense on the hills, under oak, poplar, and terebinth, because their shade is pleasant. Therefore your daughters play the prostitute, and your brides commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they play the prostitute, or your brides when they commit adultery, because the men themselves slip away with the prostitutes, and offer sacrifices with temple prostitutes. So the people without understanding are ruined. Though you, Israel, play the prostitute, Judah must not become guilty, and you are not to go to Gilgal, nor to go up to Beth Aven and take the oath, as the Lord lives. Since Israel is stubborn, like a stubborn cow, will the Lord now pasture them like a lamb in a large field. Ephraim is filled with idols, leave him alone. Their liquor is gone, they prostitute themselves continually. Their rulers dearly love shame. The wind wraps them in its wings, and they will be put to shame because of their sacrifices. So again, big passage, but the context there is important to understand that there is a pattern of disobedience. And one of the traits of that pattern is a lack of knowledge, is a lack of understanding, a lack of being able to grasp important details, because that's fundamentally what knowledge is. You know, the automatic transmission on my truck has 4 gears. My manual transmission on my car has 6 gears. You know, that's an important distinction. That's a detail. It's important. It's knowledge that I have now imparted upon you about my cars. But that's the kind of thing, you know, God says, do this, don't do that. That would be knowledge. That would be details. That would be the things you need in order to have discernment, to compare two things that are similar but not identical. We don't have that now. And Israel didn't have it then. And look at how God treated his own people. Look at how God treated the chosen, the ones who had been set apart for a special covenant. If they were not spared terrible circumstances, despite being chosen by God, how do we think that we're going to get off scot-free? How do we think that God, quote-unquote, anointing anyone is going to make a difference at this point? We're in for rough times because we rejected God, because we did not pursue Jesus Christ, because we did not pray, because we did not read the Bible, because the theologians kept pushing that it's all in God's hands, that we have no role, we have no responsibility, we have no job. It's all God's doing. We don't need to respond, we don't need to parallel, we don't need to partner. God's got it all under control, so we can check out. We don't need to know the details. We don't need to mortify the flesh. We don't need to do any of that stuff because God's already going to do it. We're in a terrible spot. But if our hope is in Christ, if our faith is not in these material circumstances, if our trust is not in politicians, people, pastors, if it's in Jesus Christ, we're going to be okay. Not because things are okay, but because we have a relationship with the Creator, with the Father, with the one who loves us so much that he orchestrated the plan of redemption to save people who didn't want it, to provide a path of reconciliation for those who didn't deserve it. How bad could it get to the point where that relationship is really going to suffer? Where I'm going to blame God for the choices of other people? Or I'm going to prevent what other people are doing, or I'm going to prevent my relationship with God because of what other people are doing? There's a reason why a lot of the early church fathers were martyred. because at some point they were challenged, and it was either this life or Jesus Christ. They chose Jesus Christ. It's unfortunately looking like we're coming to a time when that's really going to be the choice that people have to make. Is this life what matters, or is it their relationship with Jesus Christ? And I think it's going to be surprising and disappointing what people end up choosing. Pay attention to details. Gain knowledge. And not just any knowledge, but knowledge of God. Grow that relationship, the closeness that you have. Mortify the flesh. Don't let your desires in the material realm overpower you. Control them. Don't submit to the idolatry that they would lead you towards. And don't do it by yourself. Again, call on God. God, help me to fight these temptations. Help me to make better choices. Help me to love the unlovable. Teach me to treat people the way that you have treated us, by offering us the free gift of salvation. That's the path forward. It's not a candidate being elected. It's us individually, personally, coming to God, pleading for help, and waiting for his response. Because when his response comes, there's going to be action that we will take. The Bible tells us we are prepared for good works. And when God is with us, we will do things. But that's the key. We need to be reaching out to God first. We need to know that God is with us. And the way that we know that is by first throwing ourselves at the foot of God and not letting anything take us away from that place. Pleading, crying out to him for help, and not submitting to the powers of this world. It's not easy. If you need help, if you need prayer, I'm happy to try and do what I can. We should not forsake fellowship, even if it's through digital means. We need to be there for one another to support and encourage, because this is not something we can do on our own. This is not none of this is easy. But it builds, and it grows, and it matures, and it's worth doing. Take care.